Millionaire single dad watches Waitress feed his disabled daughter and changes her life forever. Hi, my beautiful story family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Today, my heart feels tender. YouTube has dropped our reach by 80% these past few days, and I won't lie, it hurts. I've given my time, my heart, and my soul to this family, but even when things get tough, I know I'm not alone. Because I have you. So please, not as a follower, but as family. Like this video, comment below and share it with 5 friends. I'm not begging, I'm leaning on the only people I trust. That's what family is for. And today, happy Father's Day to every man who stood strong, stayed silent, and carried more than we'll ever know. To those whose fathers are still here, cherish them deeply. And to those who've lost their dads, may his memory wrap around you like a warm hug. Here is my heartfelt prayer. For every father who's alive, may you be honored with peace and pride. And for those no longer with us, may their love echo forever in our lives. May strength, comfort, and healing be with every heart today. If you're still with me, if this story family still means something to you, comment with love. We are with Mr. Peter. That single line keeps me going. The storm hit Seattle like the wrath of heaven itself, turning the night into a battlefield of lightning and thunder. Rain lashed against the windows of the Bugatti Chiron as Maximilian Sterling navigated the flooded streets, his knuckles white, against the steering wheel. In the back seat, his 9-year-old daughter Alice pressed her face to the window, watching the world blur past in streaks of neon and shadow. "Daddy, I'm getting hungry," Alice said, her voice cutting through the storm's symphony. Despite everything she'd endured, the surgeries, the physical therapy, the stares from strangers who saw her leg braces before they saw her brilliant smile, Alice Sterling possessed a spirit that could light up the darkest room. Max glanced at his daughter through the rearview mirror, his heart clenching with that familiar mixture of love and protective worry that had consumed him since the day she was born. They'd been driving for over an hour, trying to get home from her physical therapy session, but every route was either flooded or blocked by fallen trees. "I know, Princess. Let me find us somewhere to stop." Normally, he would choose one of the upscale restaurants where Alice would be treated like royalty simply because of the Sterling name. But tonight, with the storm raging and his daughter's medication scheduled to consider, he needed shelter fast. The Midnight Rose Diner appeared through the rain like a beacon, its vintage neon sign casting pink and blue shadows across the empty parking lot. The place looked like something from a different era, wedged between a pawn shop and a 24-hour laundromat. Max had probably driven past it 1,000 times without ever noticing its existence. He lifted Alice from her custom car seat, her small arms wrapping around his neck as he carried her across the parking lot. The rain soaked through his $1,000 suit in seconds, but he didn't care. All that mattered was getting Alice somewhere warm and dry. The diner's bell chimed as they entered, and Max was immediately struck by the warmth that seemed to emanate from more than just the heating system. The place was nearly empty, just an elderly man reading a newspaper at the counter and a woman wiping down tables with practiced efficiency. Diana Sosa looked up as the door opened, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. She was beautiful, in a way that hit Max like a physical blow, not the artificial, surgically enhanced beauty of the women in his social circle, but something raw and genuine that took his breath away. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the diner's fluorescent lights, and when she smiled, it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. But it wasn't her beauty that stopped Max in his tracks. It was the way her eyes immediately found Alice, the way her expression shifted from polite professionalism to genuine warmth without a trace of pity or discomfort. "Well, hello there," Diana said, her voice carrying a hint of southern honey that made Max's pulse quicken. She approached them with a confidence that seemed to fill the entire space. "Y'all picked quite a night to be out and about. How about that booth over by the window? Looks like this little angel might want to watch the lightning show." Alice giggled, and Max felt something shift in his chest. His daughter hadn't laughed like that in months. "Can we sit there, Daddy? Please?" Alice's eyes were bright with excitement, and Max found himself nodding before he'd even processed the request. Diana led them to the booth, moving with a grace that made Max wonder if she'd ever considered dancing professionally. She helped Alice settle into the seat, adjusting the cushions without making a big production of it, treating her like any other child. "Now then," Diana said, sliding a menu across the table, "what sounds good tonight? Fair warning, our cook makes the best chocolate chip pancakes this side of the Mississippi, but they're about the size of dinner plates." Chocolate chip pancakes! Alice clapped her hands together, her earlier hunger forgotten in the excitement of this unexpected adventure. Max studied the woman before him, trying to reconcile her natural elegance with the simple uniform she wore. There was something about Diana Sosa that didn't fit. Intelligence that sparkled in her dark eyes, a confidence that suggested she was capable of so much more than waiting tables. "And for you?" Diana turned to Max, and he felt the full force of her attention like a spotlight. "You look like a man who takes his coffee black and his steaks rare." "Just coffee for now," Max managed, surprised by how rough his voice sounded. "Black." Diana's smile widened, and Max realized she was studying him just as intently as he was studying her. "One stack of giant chocolate chip pancakes and one black coffee coming right up." As she walked away, Max found himself watching the sway of her hips, the confident set of her shoulders. When was the last time a woman had affected him like this? When was the last time he'd felt anything beyond the mechanical motions of his carefully orchestrated life? "Daddy, she's pretty," Alice whispered, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Yes, she is," Max replied, not taking his eyes off Diana. As she moved behind the counter, Diana returned with his coffee and a coloring book for Alice, along with a small box of crayons. "These were just sitting around looking lonely," she said with a wink. "Think you might put them to good use?" Alice beamed and immediately began coloring, her small hands working with determined precision despite the slight tremor that was part of her condition. Diana watched for a moment, then did something that made Max's heart stop. She sat down in the booth across from them. "Hope you don't mind," Diana said, glancing at Max. "It's been dead in here all night, and this little artist looks like she could use an audience." For the next 20 minutes, Diana sat with them, asking Alice about her favorite colors, praising her artwork, telling stories that made Alice laugh until her cheeks were flushed with joy. She didn't ask about Alice's condition, didn't treat her any differently than she would any other 9-year-old. When Alice's pancakes arrived, and they were indeed the size of dinner plates, Diana noticed immediately that Alice was having trouble cutting them. Without making a fuss, without drawing attention to the difficulty, Diana simply reached over and began cutting the pancakes into manageable pieces. "There we go," she said casually, as if helping was the most natural thing in the world. "Now you can actually fit them in your mouth." Max watched this interaction with growing amazement. In his world, people either ignored Alice's challenges or made such a production of helping that it became embarrassing. Diana did neither. She simply saw what needed doing and did it with a grace that made it seem effortless. "Are you a mummy?" Alice asked around a mouthful of pancakes. Something flickered across Diana's face, so quickly that Max almost missed it. "No, sweetie, but I have a little brother I take care of." "Where's your little brother?" "He's at college, studying to be a doctor. He's very smart, just like you." Alice beamed at the compliment, and Max found himself leaning forward, drawn into the conversation despite himself. "What about you?" he asked, his voice softer than he'd intended. "What do you do when you're not rescuing storm refugees?" Diana's laugh was like music. "This is what I do. Night shift, 6 days a week, but I don't mind. Gives me time to think, to plan." Plan for what? Their eyes met across the table, and Max felt something electric pass between them. Diana held his gaze. For a long moment, before Alice's voice broke the spell, "Daddy, can we come back tomorrow? I like Diana." Max looked at his daughter, then back at Diana, who was watching them both with an expression he couldn't quite read. "We'll see, Princess," he said, but he was already making plans to return. As they prepared to leave, Diana helped Alice with her jacket, her movements gentle and sure. When she handed Alice a small wrapped package, Max raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "He's at college, studying to be a doctor. He's very smart, just like you." Alice beamed at the compliment, and Max found himself leaning forward, drawn into the conversation despite himself. "What about you?" he asked, his voice softer than he'd intended. "What do you do when you're not rescuing storm refugees?" Diana's laugh was like music. "This is what I do. Night shift, 6 days a week, but I don't mind. Gives me time to think, to plan." Plan for what? Their eyes met across the table, and Max felt something electric pass between them. Diana held his gaze for a long moment before Alice's voice broke the spell. "Daddy, can we come back tomorrow? I like Diana." Max looked at his daughter, then back at Diana, who was watching them both with an expression he couldn't quite read. "We'll see, Princess," he said, but he was already making plans to return. As they prepared to leave, Diana helped Alice with her jacket, her movements gentle and sure. When she handed Alice a small wrapped package, Max raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "Just a little something for the road," Diana said with a smile. "Every artist needs her supplies." Alice unwrapped it to reveal a small sketch pad and a set of colored pencils. The gift was simple, inexpensive, but chosen with obvious thought and care. "Thank you, Diana." Alice threw her arms around the woman's neck, and Max watched Diana's face transform with genuine emotion. As they walked to the car, Alice chattering excitedly about her new sketchpad, Max turned back for one last look at the diner. Diana was standing at the window watching them go, and when their eyes met through the glass, she raised her hand in a small wave. Max Sterling had built an empire worth billions. He'd conquered markets, crushed competitors, and accumulated more wealth than most people could imagine. But standing in that parking lot, watching Diana Sosa wave goodbye to his daughter, he realized he'd never wanted anything as much as he wanted to see her again. The storm was beginning to clear, but Max knew that another kind of tempest was just beginning, one that would change everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and what it meant to truly live. Chapter 2. Forbidden Desire. Max Sterling had always been a man of routine. Wake at 5 a.m., gym for an hour, breakfast while reviewing market reports, then 12 hours of meetings, calls, and decisions that moved millions of dollars. His life was precisely calibrated, every moment accounted for, every variable controlled, until Diana Sosa. For 3 weeks, he found himself driving Alice to the Midnight Rose Diner every night, telling himself it was for his daughter's sake. Alice loved Diana, that much was true. She talked about the beautiful Waitress constantly, drew pictures of the three of them together, and showed more energy and joy than she'd displayed since her mother's death. But if Max was honest, and he prided himself on brutal honesty, at least with himself, Alice wasn't the only reason he kept returning. Tonight was no different. As his Bugatti pulled into the diner's parking lot, Max felt that familiar flutter of anticipation in his chest, the same feeling he'd once gotten from closing major business deals. Except this was better. This was dangerous. "Is Diana working?" "Tonight, Daddy?" Alice asked from the back seat, her face pressed to the window as she scanned the diner. "We'll see, Princess." But Max already knew Diana was there. He'd learned her schedule by heart, knew she worked Tuesday through Sunday, knew she preferred the overnight hours because they paid better and allowed her to care for her brother during the day. The bell chimed as they entered, and there she was, Venus in a diner uniform, moving between tables with that hypnotic grace that made Max's mouth go dry. She looked up as they walked in, and that smile, God, that smile, lit up the entire room. "Well, if it isn't my two favorite customers," Diana said, approaching them with arms outstretched for Alice's hug. "Right on time. Your usual booth is waiting." Max watched the embrace, noting how Diana held his daughter with genuine affection, how Alice seemed to melt into her arms, like she'd found something she'd been searching for her entire life. The sight stirred something primal in him. Not just desire, though God knew that was there in spades, but something deeper, something that felt like home. "Diana, guess what?" Alice bounced with excitement as they settled into their booth. "Daddy's going to teach me to swim. He said you could come watch if you want." Max felt heat creep up his neck. He hadn't exactly said that, but Alice had a way of interpreting conversations in the most optimistic possible light. Diana's eyes met his across the table, and he saw something flicker there. Interest? Amusement? The connection between them was becoming impossible to ignore, an electric current that seemed to charge the air whenever they were in the same room. "That sounds wonderful," Diana said carefully. "Swimming is great exercise, especially before—" She paused and Max tensed, waiting for the inevitable awkward reference to Alice's condition. "Especially for mermaids in training," Diana finished with a perfectly straight face. "I can tell just by looking at you that you're going to be an excellent swimmer." Alice giggled, and Max felt that familiar tightness in his chest. How did Diana always know exactly the right thing to say? "Can I get you both started with your usual?" Diana asked, though her eyes lingered on Max's face. "Actually," Max heard himself saying, "could I get a menu? Maybe try something different tonight." Diana's eyebrows rose slightly, and Max caught the hint of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Feeling adventurous, are we?" The way she said it, with just a hint of challenge in her voice, made Max's pulse quicken. Everything about this woman was a challenge. Her intelligence, her independence, the way she seemed completely unimpressed by his obvious wealth. "You could say that." Diana leaned closer to place the menu in front of him, and Max caught a hint of her perfume, something light and floral that made him want to bury his face in her neck. When her fingers brushed his as she handed him the menu, he felt the contact like an electric shock. "I'll give you a few minutes to decide," she said, her voice slightly breathless. As Diana walked away, Max realized Alice was staring at him with the kind of knowing look that was unsettling on a 9-year-old. "You like Diana, don't you, Daddy?" Max nearly choked on his coffee. "What makes you say that? You get all funny when she's around. Your voice gets different, and you keep staring at her. Out of the mouths of babes." "Diana is a very nice woman. She's pretty too." "Yes, she is. Are you going to marry her?" Max's heart stuttered. "Alice, honey, it's not that simple." "Why not? You like her, she likes you, and she loves me. That's all the important stuff, right?" If only it were that simple. If only Diana knew who he really was, what his world looked like. If only he could be sure that her kindness wasn't just excellent customer service, that her smiles weren't just part of the job. Diana returned to take his order, and Max found himself studying her face, looking for clues. Did she feel this pull between them, or was he projecting his own desperate longing onto innocent interactions? "So what'll it be?" she asked, pen poised over her notepad. "Surprise me," Max said impulsively. "Whatever you think I'd like." Diana's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment Max thought he saw something vulnerable flicker across her features. "That's a lot of trust to put in someone you barely know," she said softly. "Maybe I'm a good judge of character." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Max felt the world narrow to just the two of them. The diner, Alice, the other customers, everything else faded away until there was only Diana's dark eyes searching his face. "Daddy?" Alice's voice broke the spell, and both adults jerked back as if they'd been caught doing something wrong. "I'll surprise you," Diana said quickly, backing away from the table. "Give me 15 minutes. Max watched her go, admiring the sway of her hips, the confident set of her shoulders. Every move she made was like poetry, and he was becoming addicted to the rhythm of her. "She likes you too," Alice said matter-of-factly, coloring in her sketchbook. "I can tell." "How can you tell?" "She gets all fluttery when you look at her, and she always makes sure your coffee cup is full, even when other people are waiting." Max glanced around the diner, realizing for the first time that Alice was right. Diana did seem to pay special attention to their table, finding excuses to check on them, even when they didn't need anything. When Diana returned with his food, a perfectly prepared steak with garlic mashed potatoes that looked like something from a high-end restaurant, Max was surprised by the quality. "You didn't make this in the diner kitchen," he said after the first bite. Diana blushed, looking suddenly uncertain. "I may have taken some liberties with the preparation. I hope that's okay." "It's incredible. Where did you learn to cook like this?" "Community college culinary program. I was working toward my associate's degree before—" She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Before what?" Diana glanced at Alice, who was absorbed in her coloring, then back at Max. "Before my parents died in a car accident and I had to drop out to take care of Xavier. He was only 14. The simple statement hit Max like a physical blow. Here was this extraordinary woman, clearly capable of so much more, working nights at a diner to support her brother's education. The sacrifice involved, the strength it must have taken, humbled him completely. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Diana shrugged, but Max could see the pain she was trying to hide. "You do what you have to do for family." Family. Max understood that concept better than most. Everything. He'd built every decision he'd made for the past 3 years had been about protecting and providing for Alice. "Xavier's lucky to have you," he said. "I'm lucky to have him. He keeps me grounded, reminds me that there's more to life than just getting by." As the evening wore on, their conversation deepened. Diana told him about her dreams of opening her own restaurant someday, about the recipes she developed during slow nights at the diner. Max found himself sharing more than he'd intended, about Alice's challenges, about the loneliness of single parenthood, about the way success sometimes felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. When the diner began to empty out, Diana slid into the booth across from them, officially off duty, but reluctant to leave. Alice had fallen asleep with her head on Max's shoulder, her sketchbook still open in front of her. "She's beautiful," Diana whispered, reaching out to gently brush a strand of hair from Alice's face. "You're a good father." "I try," Max said. "Some days I feel like I'm failing her. Trust me, you're not. The way she talks about you, the way she lights up when you walk in, that little girl adores you." The softness in Diana's voice, the tenderness with which she looked at Alice, made Max's chest tight with longing. What would it be like to have someone look at him like that? To have a partner in this journey, someone who loved Alice as much as he did? "I should get her home," he said reluctantly. Diana nodded, but neither of them moved. The moment felt too precious to break, this bubble of intimacy they'd created in the empty diner. "Max?" Diana's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yeah? This thing between us? I feel it too." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and danger. Max looked into Diana's eyes and saw his own longing reflected there, the same desperate wanting that had been consuming him for weeks. "Diana, I know it's complicated. I know we're from different worlds, but I can't stop thinking about you." Max's heart hammered against his ribs. Everything in him wanted to reach across the table, to pull her into his arms and taste those lips that had been haunting his dreams. But Alice was asleep against his shoulder, and the weight of all his secrets, his wealth, his real identity, the complications that came with his world, held him back. "I think about you too," he admitted. "More than I should." Diana's smile was soft and sad. "We're playing with fire, aren't we? Probably. And we're going to get burned. Probably. But we're going to keep coming back anyway." Max looked at this incredible woman, this strong, beautiful, impossibly kind woman who had somehow slipped past all his defenses, and knew she was right. Whatever this was between them, whatever the consequences might be, he was already too far gone to turn back. "Yeah," he said softly. "We are." As he carried Alice to the car, Max turned back for one last look at Diana. She was standing at the window, watching them go, and the longing on her face matched the aching need in his own chest. Tomorrow he would come back, and the night after, and the night after that, because Diana Sosa had become his addiction, and Max Sterling had never been good at denying himself the things he wanted most. Chapter 3. Walls Crumble. Diana Sosa had always prided herself on being practical. Growing up poor, losing her parents young, raising Xavier while working multiple jobs, life had taught her to be realistic about her place in the world. Rich men didn't fall for waitresses except in fairy tales, and Diana had stopped believing. In fairy tales, the night she held her brother while he cried for parents who would never come home, but Maximilian Sterling, or Max, as he insisted she call him, was making it increasingly difficult to remember that truth. For 4 weeks now, he'd been coming to the diner every night with Alice, and Diana found herself living for those visits. She'd memorized everything about him. The way he ran his fingers through his dark hair when he was thinking, the protective way he held Alice, the intensity in his grey eyes when he looked at her. She'd also noticed the expensive watch, the perfectly tailored clothes, the luxury car he tried to park where she couldn't see it from the diner windows. Max had money. Serious money. And Diana had learned long ago that men with serious money didn't date women like her, so why couldn't she stop herself from falling for him? Tuesday morning found Diana at the downtown library, her one quiet hour before heading home to sleep. She'd been researching culinary programs, dreaming of returning to school someday, when she decided to browse through the business magazines. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was self-torture, but she found herself picking up the latest issue of Fortune. The cover story was about Seattle's tech boom, and she was idly flipping through the pages when a photograph stopped her cold. There, smiling from a full-page spread about billionaire entrepreneurs, was Max Sterling. Not the humble single father who brought his daughter to the diner for chocolate chip pancakes, but Maximilian Sterling, CEO and founder of Sterling Technologies, worth an estimated $2.8 billion. Diana's hands shook as she read the article. Private jets, multiple homes, business deals that shaped entire industries. This was Max's real world, a universe so far removed from her own that they might as well have been living on different planets. The worst part wasn't the money, though. It was the lies. Every conversation they'd had, every moment of seeming intimacy had been built on deception. While she'd been honest about her struggles, her dreams, her fears, he'd been playing some kind of game. Diana drove home in a daze, the magazine clutched in her trembling hands. By the time she reached her small apartment, hurt had crystallized into anger. She'd been such a fool, reading meaning into his smiles, believing that a man like him could genuinely care about a woman like her. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Looking forward to seeing you tonight. Bim." Diana stared at the message, fury rising in her throat like bile. He'd somehow gotten her number, probably another demonstration of the power his money could buy, and now he was texting her like they were dating, like she was some naive girl who didn't know the difference between genuine affection and a rich man's boredom. She typed back, "Don't come to the diner tonight. Don't come again." Her phone rang immediately. Diana let it go to voicemail, then listened to his confused, concerned voice asking what was wrong, begging her to call him back. She deleted the message and turned off her phone. But that evening, as her shift started at the Midnight Rose, Diana found herself watching the parking lot despite her best intentions. Part of her hoped he would respect her wishes and stay away. A larger part, the part that made her stomach twist with self-recrimination, hoped he would ignore her text and come anyway. At 10:30 p.m., the Bugatti pulled into the parking lot. Diana's. Heart hammered as she watched Max lift Alice from the car. Even through her anger, she felt a pang at the sight of the little girl. Whatever Max's motives, Alice's affection had been real. The child had done nothing wrong except fall in love with a woman who had foolishly allowed herself to fall for her father. The bell chimed as they entered, and Alice's face lit up with joy. "Diana!" But Diana stepped back when Alice rushed toward her, keeping the counter between them. "Hello, Alice!" The little girl stopped, confusion replacing excitement. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "I'm fine," Diana said, not looking at Max. "Your regular booth is taken tonight. You'll have to sit at the counter." Max stepped forward, his face tense with concern. "Diana, what's going on? You haven't returned my calls." "I'll take your order," Diana said coldly, pulling out her notepad. "What can I get you?" "Daddy, why is Diana being weird?" Alice asked, her voice small and uncertain. Diana's heart clenched, but she forced herself to remain professional. "Chocolate chip pancakes for you, miss. And coffee for your father." "Diana, please," Max said urgently. "Whatever I did wrong, let me fix it. Don't take this out on Alice." The use of his daughter as leverage made Diana's anger flare white-hot. 2 minutes, she said through gritted teeth. "Outside, now." She stalked toward the diner's back exit, knowing he would follow. The alley behind the building was dimly lit and smelled of rain and garbage, but Diana needed the privacy to unleash the fury that had been building all day. Max appeared in the doorway, looking genuinely confused and worried. "Diana, what happened? Yesterday everything was fine, and now you won't even look at me. Yesterday I didn't know who you really were." Diana pulled the Fortune magazine from her apron and threw it at his chest. "Maximilian Sterling, tech billionaire. Ring any bells?" Max caught the magazine, his face going pale as he saw his own photograph staring back at him. "Diana, I can explain." "Explain what? How you've been lying to me for a month? How you've been pretending to be some regular single dad when you're worth almost $3 billion. I never lied to you. You never told me the truth. Do you have any idea how humiliated I feel right now? I actually thought—" Diana's voice cracked, and she hated herself for the weakness. "God, I'm so stupid." "You thought what?" Max stepped closer, and Diana backed against the brick wall. "Tell me what you thought." "I thought you cared about me," she whispered. "I thought there was something real between us." Max's hands came up to brace against the wall on either side of her head, trapping her with his body. This close, she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "There is something real between us," he said urgently. "That's exactly why I didn't tell you about the money. Do you know what it's like, never knowing if someone likes you for yourself or for what you can give them? Do you know how many women have tried to use Alice to get to my fortune? So you decided to test me? String me along until you were sure I wasn't a gold digger? No, that's not. How long were you planning to keep lying? Until after you got me into bed? until you got bored and moved on to the next naive waitress? Diana, stop. Max's voice was raw with emotion. You're the first person in 3 years who looked at Alice and saw a little girl instead of a meal ticket. You're the first woman I've met who makes me feel like a man instead of a bank account. I didn't tell you about the money because I was falling for you, and I couldn't bear the thought of that changing anything. Diana stared into his eyes, seeing pain there that matched her own. Despite her anger, despite the betrayal, she could feel herself wavering. The man standing in front of her, pressing her against the wall with barely controlled desperation, didn't feel like a stranger. He felt like Max, the tender father and lonely man she'd been falling in love with. I can't trust you, she whispered. Yes, you can. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb stroking across her skin. I know I handled this wrong. I know I should have told you sooner. But Diana, what I feel for you is real. What we have is real. What we have is based on lies. No, Max said fiercely. What we have is based on this. He kissed her then, crushing his mouth to hers, with 4 weeks of pent-up longing. Diana's first instinct was to push him away, to maintain her anger and her dignity. But the moment his lips touched hers, every rational thought fled her mind. The kiss was desperate, hungry, full of need and frustration and desire too long denied. Max's hands tangled in her hair, and Diana found herself kissing him back with equal fervor, her body responding to his touch despite her mind's protests. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Max rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if he were in pain. Tell me you don't feel that, he whispered. Tell me this is all in my head. Diana wanted to lie, wanted to protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak that came with loving a man so far out of her league. But the heat of his body against hers, the sincerity in his voice, the memory of his lips on hers made honesty impossible to avoid. I feel it, she admitted, but that doesn't change anything. You're a billionaire, Max. You live in a world I can't even imagine. Then let me show you my world. Let me prove that the money doesn't matter. It always matters, Diana said sadly. Money like that doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It changes everything. How people see you, how they treat you, what they expect from you. I've seen enough rich men come through this diner to know how it works. Max pulled back, his hands framing her face. I'm not other rich men. And you're not like anyone I've ever met. Diana, I'm falling in love with you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Diana had dreamed of hearing them, had imagined what it would feel like to have this man declare his feelings. She hadn't expected it to hurt this much. Don't, she whispered. Please don't say that. Why not? It's true. Because it's not enough. Tears she'd been holding back finally spilled over. Love doesn't bridge the gap between your penthouse and my one-bedroom apartment. Love doesn't make me the kind of woman who belongs in your world. You belong with me, Max said urgently. You belong with Alice. We need you. Diana closed her eyes, fighting against the temptation to believe him. I need to get back to work. She pushed past him, heading for the diner's back door. Max caught her arm, spinning her around to face him. This isn't over, he said. I'm not giving up on us. Diana looked into his eyes, seeing determination there that both thrilled and terrified her. There is no us, Max. There can't be. She pulled, free, and walked back into the diner, leaving him standing alone in the alley. But as she returned to work, trying to pretend her lips weren't still tingling from his kiss, Diana knew she was lying to herself. There was definitely an us. The question was whether she was brave enough to fight for it, or if she would let fear and practicality destroy the best thing that had ever happened to her. Inside the diner, Alice sat at the counter, her small face etched with worry. Is Daddy in trouble? Diana's heart broke a little more. No, sweetie, your daddy's not in trouble. Are you still going to be our friend? Diana knelt down to Alice's eye level, smoothing the child's hair with gentle fingers. "I'll always be your friend. Alice, always." It was a promise she meant with every fiber of her being, even if she had no idea how she was going to keep it. Chapter 4. Surrender to Love. For 3 days, Diana managed to avoid Max Sterling entirely. She changed her schedule, started working the day shift instead of nights, and took a different route home. But avoidance only worked until the flowers started arriving. The first bouquet appeared on her doorstep Wednesday morning. 24 white roses with a simple card. "I'm sorry. Please give me a chance to explain." Diana threw them away, but not before breathing in their intoxicating scent. Thursday brought sunflowers, bright and cheerful, with a note that read, "These reminded me of your smile. I miss seeing it." Friday's delivery was a single red rose with a poem written in Max's careful handwriting. "In a world of artificial light, you shine with truth so pure and bright. I was a fool to hide my heart. Please don't let fear keep us apart." Diana kept that one, pressing it between the pages of her cookbook like a lovesick teenager. Saturday morning, she found something different on her doorstep. Not flowers, but a large wrapped package with Alice's artwork taped to the outside. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of professional chef's knives, the kind Diana had dreamed of owning but could never afford. The note, written in Alice's careful 9-year-old script, nearly broke her resolve entirely. "Dear Diana, Daddy told me you're sad because he didn't tell you about our big house and all his money. I told him that was dumb because you're not the kind of person who cares about stuff like that. You care about people's hearts. Daddy's heart is very good, even if his brain is sometimes silly. Please don't stay mad at us. I drew you a picture of us being a family because that's what I wish for every night. Love, Alice. P.S. Daddy cries when he thinks I'm not looking." The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands. A tall man, a woman with beautiful curly hair, and a little girl with leg braces. Above them, Alice had written, "My family," in purple crayon. Diana sat on her kitchen floor and sobbed. Sunday night, Diana returned to her regular shift, knowing she couldn't hide forever. She told herself she was prepared to see Max, that she had her defenses rebuilt and her heart properly armored. She was lying. At 9:47 p.m., Max walked through the diner door, alone. Diana's heart clenched with worry. Where was Alice? Before, she noticed the little girl wasn't with him. Max looked terrible. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. When he saw Diana, relief flooded his features, so completely that she had to grip the counter to keep from running to him. "Diana!" Her name came out like a prayer. "Where's Alice?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain steady. "With her grandmother. I needed to talk to you alone." Max approached slowly, as if she were a wild animal that might bolt. "Please don't. Run away again." Diana crossed her arms, trying to maintain her distance, even as everything in her yearned to close the space between them. "I'm working. I bought the diner." Diana blinked, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "I bought the Midnight Rose. As of this morning, I own it." Max's eyes never left her face. "I also bought out your employment contract, which means you're free to pursue other opportunities, like talking to me." "You did not buy this diner just to force me to talk to you." "Actually, I did exactly that." Max's mouth quirked in the first hint of a smile she'd seen from him all week. "Diana, I've been going crazy without you. Alice asks about you every day. I can't eat, can't sleep, can't focus on anything except finding a way to prove that what we have is real." Diana stared at him, torn between outrage and something that felt dangerously like affection. "You're insane, probably. but I'm also completely, desperately in love with you, so insanity seems appropriate. Max stepped closer, and Diana could smell his cologne, could see the stubble on his jaw where he'd forgotten to shave. I know buying the diner was extreme. I know it probably seems manipulative or controlling, but Diana, I was desperate. I couldn't lose you because I was too proud or too scared to fight for what we have. Before Diana could respond, Max took her hands in his expression growing serious. Diana, I know this is crazy. I know we've only known each other for 5 weeks, and I know that buying the diner probably makes me seem unhinged. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Alice has never connected with another person the way she's connected with you. He paused, taking a shaky breath. I can't bear the thought of losing either of those things because I was too proud or too scared to fight for them. So I'm asking you, will you give us another chance? Will you let me prove that this isn't about convenience or control, but about love? Diana looked into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there, the genuine fear that she might say no. The gesture was extreme, yes, but it came from a place of desperation rather than manipulation. The ring cost $2 million, Max continued softly, but I would have proposed with a plastic ring from a cereal box if that's all I had. Because Diana Sosa, you are worth everything I have and everything I'll ever be. Max. Diana's voice was barely a whisper. I know we've only known each other for 5 weeks. I know this is crazy and fast and probably terrifying. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Alice has never connected with another person the way she's connected with you. And I can't bear the thought of losing either of those things because I was too proud or too scared to fight for them. Tears spilled down Diana's cheeks as she looked at this man who had somehow managed to demolish every wall she'd built around her heart. The other customers were watching, phones out, probably recording what would either be the most romantic moment of her life or the most public humiliation. Everyone's staring, she whispered. Let them stare. Let them post it on social media. Let the whole world know that Maximilian Sterling is madly in love with Diana Sosa and doesn't care who knows it. Let them stare. Let them post it on social media. Let the whole world know that Maximilian Sterling is madly in love with Diana Sosa and doesn't care who knows it. Diana laughed, despite her tears. You really bought the diner? I really bought the diner. I was planning to give it to you as a wedding present, but I suppose that depends on your answer to my question. Diana looked down at the ring, then back at Max's hopeful face. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was madness, that fairy tales didn't happen to girls like her, that she was setting herself up for heartbreak. But then she thought about Alice's drawing, about the way Max looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, about the loneliness she'd felt these past 3 days without them in her life. Ask me again, she said softly. Max's face lit up with hope. Diana Sosa, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Alice's mother, my partner in everything that matters? Will you take a chance on love even when it's complicated and scary and probably insane? Diana held out her trembling hand, and Max slipped the ring onto her finger. With reverent care, it was too big, too expensive, too much, and absolutely perfect. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, I'll marry you. Max surged to his feet and swept her into his arms, spinning her around the diner as the other customers burst into applause. When he set her down, he framed her face with his hands and kissed her with a passion that made her forget where they were, who was watching, why she'd ever thought she could resist him. I love you, he murmured against her lips. I love your strength, your kindness, your loyalty to the people you care about. I love how you see the best in everyone, especially Alice. I love how you make me want to be a better man. I love you, too, Diana admitted, the words feeling like a confession and a promise all at once. I tried so hard not to, but I love you too. Max's smile was radiant as he kissed her again, and Diana finally understood what all the songs and poems were about. This was what it felt like to find your person, your other half, the missing piece that made you whole. When they finally broke apart, Max reached into his jacket and pulled out a set of keys. Your diner, Madame Proprietor. What do you want to? Name it? Diana looked around the space that had been her workplace, her refuge, her sanctuary for 2 years. Soon it would be something entirely different, not just a place where she served coffee and listened to other people's problems, but a foundation for the future she was building with the man she loved. Alice's place, she said without hesitation. I want to name it Alice's place. Max's eyes filled with tears, and Diana knew she'd given him the perfect answer. Not because it was what he wanted to hear, but because it was what her heart told her was right. As they kissed again, surrounded by cheering strangers and bathed in the pink glow of the diner's neon sign, Diana finally understood that sometimes fairy tales did come true. You just had to be brave enough to believe in them, and maybe, just maybe, brave enough to believe in love. Chapter 5. Trust Rebuilt. The first thing Diana noticed about Max's penthouse wasn't the stunning view of Elliot Bay or the priceless artwork adorning the walls. It wasn't even the fact that her entire apartment could fit inside his living room 3 times over. What struck her most was how empty it felt, despite being filled with beautiful things. It's not very homey, is it? Max said, following her gaze as she took in the sterile perfection of his world. He'd brought her here the morning after his proposal, wanting to show her the life he was offering, but Diana could see the uncertainty in his eyes. It's beautiful, Diana said carefully, running her fingers along the cool marble of his kitchen island. Very sophisticated. You hate it. Diana turned to face him, seeing vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. 3 days engaged, and she was still learning to read the subtle ways his composure cracked when he let his guard down. I don't hate it, she said honestly, but it doesn't feel like you. Where are Alice's drawings? Her toys? Where do you actually live in this place? Max's laugh was rueful. Alice's wing is upstairs. I tried to keep the common areas presentable for business entertaining. This is a home, not a hotel, Diana said gently. Show me where Alice lives. Max led her up a sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, and Diana immediately felt the difference. This part of the penthouse was alive with color and warmth. Alice's bedroom was a wonderland of purple walls, fairy lights, and artwork covering every available surface. Books overflowed from shelves, and stuffed animals claimed territory on every piece of furniture. Now this feels like you, Diana said, picking up a framed photo of Max and Alice at the beach. Alice was buried up to her neck in sand, laughing hysterically while Max grinned at the camera. She decorates her own space. I've never had the heart to impose any adult aesthetic choices. Diana sat on Alice's bed, surrounded by the evidence of a happy childhood, despite everything the little girl had endured. Where does she do her physical therapy? There's a gym downstairs. I had it specially equipped with everything her therapists recommended. Max hesitated. Would you like to see it? The home gym was impressive. Professional-grade equipment. Adapted for Alice's needs, parallel bars for walking practice, a small pool for aquatic therapy, but Diana noticed something that made her heart ache. She exercises alone. Her therapists come 3 times a week. I supervise when I'm not in meetings. Diana could picture it. Alice working through her exercises in this sterile, lonely space, while Max watched from the sidelines, both of them isolated in their own ways. When I was little, Diana said softly, my mom used to make me practice piano every day. I hated it until she started playing duets with me. Suddenly it wasn't work anymore, it was time with Mama. Max was quiet for a long moment. I've never known how to help without getting in the way. You don't help by staying back, Max. You help by showing up. That afternoon, Diana convinced Max to skip his afternoon meetings and spend time with Alice when she got home from school. The little girl's joy at seeing Diana again was infectious, and her excitement about the engagement was adorable. "Are you going to live with us now?" Alice asked, bouncing on her bed while Diana helped her change out of her school uniform. "We're still figuring out the details," Diana said diplomatically. The truth was, she had no idea how to navigate this new reality. Her entire life was across town. Her apartment, her brother, her routine. Max's world felt like visiting another planet. "I told everyone at school that my daddy's getting married to the most beautiful woman in the world," Alice announced proudly. "Tommy Peterson said you're probably just marrying him for his money, but I told him that was stupid because you didn't even know about the money at first." Diana's heart clenched. Even at 9, Alice was already learning about the complexities of wealth and relationships. "What do you think about Daddy and me getting married?" Alice's face grew serious. "I think Daddy's been sad for a really long time, and you make him happy. And I think—" She hesitated, then rushed on. "I think maybe you could be my mom. My real mom died when I was little, and I love her, but I don't really remember her. Is it okay to want a new mom?" Diana pulled Alice into her arms, holding her tight. "It's absolutely okay, sweetheart, and I would be honored to be your mom." Later that evening, Diana convinced Max to join Alice for her physical therapy session. At first, he hung back, clearly uncomfortable with the unfamiliar role, but Diana gently guided him into participating. "Alice, show your dad how strong you've gotten," Diana encouraged, positioning herself on one side of the parallel bars while Max stood uncertainly on the other. For the next hour, they worked together, Max counting repetitions while Diana provided encouragement, both of them cheering Alice's progress. The little girl glowed under their combined attention, working harder than Diana had ever seen her work. "I think I walked farther today than I ever have," Alice announced proudly. As they finished, "You definitely did," Max said, and Diana could hear the amazement in his voice. "I had no idea you were this strong." "I get stronger every day," Alice said matter-of-factly. "Diana says strong isn't just about muscles, it's about heart." Max's eyes met Diana's over Alice's head, and she saw something shift in his expression. Understanding, perhaps. Or maybe just recognition of how much they both had to learn about being a family. That night, after Alice was in bed, Max and Diana sat on his balcony overlooking the city. The space between them on the outdoor sofa felt charged with possibility and uncertainty. "I've been thinking about our future," Max said, refilling her wine glass. "My publicist thinks we should do something formal when we're ready to get engaged. Business associates, prominent families, the society page treatment." Diana felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. "How many people are we talking about? 200? Maybe 300? The kind of event that gets photographed for magazines." "Max," Diana set down her wineglass, gathering her courage. "I need to tell you something. The idea of being paraded around like your latest acquisition terrifies me." Max's face went carefully blank. "I'm not trying to parade you around. I know you're not doing it intentionally, but that's how it will feel to me. 300 people, judging whether I'm pretty enough, sophisticated enough, worthy enough to be with you. You are worthy of me. Diana, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I know you believe that, but those people won't see what you see. They'll see a waitress who got lucky." Max was quiet for a long moment, and Diana held her breath, afraid she'd pushed too hard too fast. "What would you prefer?" he asked finally. "Something small, intimate, the people who matter most to both of us. My business associates matter to our future financial security. Do they matter to Alice? Max paused, considering. No. Then they don't matter to our family. The word family hung in the air between them, weighted with promise and responsibility. Diana had never used it so casually before, but it felt right. Natural. Family, Max repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Diana moved closer on the sofa, close enough to take his hand. I want to build something real with you, Max. Not a business merger or a social alliance. I want us to be partners in everything that matters. Max brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. I want that too. I've never done this before. The relationship part, even with Alice's mother, it was more of an arrangement than a partnership. We'll figure it out together, Diana said. But I need you to trust me when I tell you that your world is overwhelming. I need time to adjust, and I need you to be patient while I find my place in it. What if I said we could start over, pretend the money doesn't exist, and just be Max, Diana, and Alice figuring out how to be a family? Diana smiled, recognizing the impossibility of what he was suggesting while appreciating the sentiment behind it. The money will always exist, Max. But maybe we can focus on the things that matter more. Like what? Like the fact that Alice walked farther today than she ever has because both her parents were there cheering her on. Like the fact that you laugh more when you're with us than you do in board meetings. Like the fact that I've never felt as safe or as loved as I do when you look at me. Max's hand cupped her cheek, thumb stroking across her skin. I do love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Then that's what we build on, Diana said simply. Love. Everything else is just details. Max kissed her, then soft and sweet and full of promise. As Diana melted into his arms, she felt the last of her doubts fade away. This was right. They were right. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. When they broke apart, Max rested his forehead against hers. Small engagement party? Very small. Just family and the closest friends? Perfect. And maybe, Max said with a grin, that reminded her of Alice at her most mischievous, we could have it at Alice's place, officially christen the diner under its new name. Diana's laugh was pure joy. Now you're talking like a man who understands what really matters. As they sat together on the balcony, planning their future and watching the city lights twinkle below, Diana realized that home wasn't about marble countertops or priceless artwork. Home was wherever she and Max and Alice chose to build their life together. And for the first time since she'd put on his ring, that felt entirely possible. Chapter 6. Family Bonds. Diana's hands shook as she unlocked the door to her small apartment, Max and Alice following close behind. After 2 weeks of spending every evening at the penthouse, this was the first time she'd brought them to her world, and the contrast was stark. It's so cozy, Alice exclaimed, immediately gravitating toward the gallery wall of family photos that dominated Diana's tiny living room. Is this your brother? He looks just like you. That's Xavier, Diana said, watching Max take in her modest surroundings. Where his penthouse was all clean lines and expensive materials, her apartment was cluttered with memories, books, and mismatched furniture collected over years of making do. Max picked up a framed photo of Diana and Xavier at his high school graduation, both of them beaming with pride, despite Diana's uniform, from her old job at a downtown hotel. How old were you here? He asked softly. 22. Xavier had just been accepted to pre-med at UW with a full scholarship. Diana's voice carried the pride that still filled her whenever she thought about that day. I wore my work uniform to the ceremony because I had to go straight to my second job afterward. 2 jobs, 3 actually. Hotel housekeeping during the day, restaurant hostess in the evening, and weekend catering gigs. Diana shrugged, as if sacrificing her own education and social life for her brother's future had been the most natural thing in the world. Whatever it took, Max set the photo down gently, his expression unreadable. Alice had moved on to Diana's small kitchen, marveling at the recipes taped to the cabinet doors and the herb garden growing on the windowsill. "Diana, can we cook something together?" Alice asked, running her fingers over the fresh basil plants. "Daddy never cooks. He just orders food or has the housekeeper make stuff. What would you like to make?" Diana asked, grateful for the distraction from Max's intense scrutiny of her living space. "Something we can surprise Daddy with." For the next hour, Diana and Alice worked together to prepare Diana's grandmother's recipe for arroz con pollo. Alice perched on a stool so she could reach the counter comfortably. Max sat at Diana's small dining table, watching them work with an expression of wonder. "Tell me about your grandmother," Alice said, as Diana showed her how to season the chicken. "Abuela Rosa raised me and Xavier after our parents died. She taught me everything I know about cooking, about love, about taking care of family." Diana's voice grew soft with memory. "She used to say that food made with love tastes different than food made just to fill your stomach. Is that why your food at the diner was so good? Maybe. I always cook like I'm feeding my family." Alice was quiet for a moment, carefully stirring the rice as Diana had shown her. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Does that mean you think of me as family?" Diana's heart clenched at the hope in the little girl's voice. She knelt down to Alice's eye level, taking her small hands in her own. "Alice Sterling, you are absolutely my family. You've been my family since the first night you walked into the diner." Alice's smile was radiant. "Can I call you Mama D? I heard Xavier call you that in one of the videos on your phone." The request hit Diana like a physical blow, overwhelming in its sweetness. She glanced at Max, who was watching the exchange with tears in his eyes. "You can call me whatever feels right to you, sweetheart. Mama D it is," Alice declared, throwing her arms around Diana's neck. "I love you, Mama D. I love you too, baby girl." When Xavier arrived that evening, Diana was nervous about the meeting in a way she hadn't expected. Her brother's opinion mattered to her more than anyone's, and while she'd told him about Max and Alice, she hadn't prepared him for the reality of Max Sterling himself. Xavier knocked on the door at exactly 7 o'clock, and Diana could hear the surprise in his voice when Max answered instead of her. "You must be Xavier," Max said, extending his hand. "I'm Max. Diana's told me so much about you." "The billionaire," Xavier said bluntly, shaking Max's hand while studying his face with the intensity of someone used to reading people quickly and accurately. "Among other things," Max replied evenly. Diana appeared in the doorway, wrapping Xavier in a fierce hug. At 25, her brother had grown into a handsome man who carried himself with quiet confidence, but Diana would always see the 14-year-old boy who'd cried in her arms the night their parents died. "Zed, meet Alice," Diana said, drawing her brother into the apartment. "Alice, this is my baby brother, Xavier." Alice, who had been shy around most adults since her mother's death, immediately took to Xavier with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. "Are you really going to be a doctor?" she asked, showing him her leg braces with matter-of-fact pride. "I have spina bifida, and I see lots of doctors. Maybe you could be my doctor someday." "I'd be honored," Xavier said seriously. "What kind of medicine are you most interested in learning about?" For the next few minutes, Alice peppered Xavier with questions about medical school, his studies, and what kind of doctor he wanted to become. Diana watched her brother's natural ease with the little girl, remembering how good he'd always been with children, despite being the youngest in their family. "Dinner's ready," Diana announced, and they gathered around her small table, which barely accommodated 4 people, but somehow felt perfect for this moment. Over arroz con pollo and stories about Diana's childhood, the barriers between them began To dissolve, Xavier grilled Max with the protective intensity of a big brother, despite being younger, while Alice charmed everyone with her bright personality and infectious laugh. "So," Xavier said, as Diana served dessert, flan, that Alice had helped prepare. "What are your intentions with my sister?" Max didn't laugh off the question the way most men might have. Instead, he considered it seriously, his eyes moving between Diana and Alice before settling on Xavier. "I intend to love her for the rest of my life," Max said simply. "I intend to build a family with her, to support her dreams, and to make sure she never has to sacrifice her own happiness for someone else's needs again." Xavier nodded slowly. "Good answer, but Diana's been taking care of everyone else since she was 19. She's forgotten how to let other people take care of her." "I'm learning that," Max said, glancing at Diana with an expression full of tenderness. "But I'm a patient man." "You'll need to be. My sister's stubborn as hell." "Hey," Diana protested, laughing despite herself, "I'm sitting right here." "We know," Xavier and Max said in unison, sharing a look of masculine understanding that made Diana both exasperated and touched. After dinner, Alice curled up on Diana's couch with a book while the adults cleaned up together. It was domestic and comfortable in a way that Diana had never experienced with Max before. Just the four of them, no staff, no formal dining room, just family taking care of each other. "I like him," Xavier murmured to Diana as they washed dishes side by side, keeping his voice low enough that Max couldn't hear from across the kitchen. "Just like him? Fine. I more than like him. The way he looks at you. Diana, I've never seen anyone look at you like that before." Diana glanced over at Max, who was helping Alice sound out a difficult word in her book, his expression patient and gentle. "Like what?" "Like you're the most precious thing in his world. Like he can't believe he's lucky enough to have you." Xavier dried his hands and turned to face his sister fully. "He loves Alice, but he worships you. There's a difference." Heat flushed Diana's cheeks. "It's still new, Z. We're still figuring things out." "Maybe. But I know you, Dee. You've never let yourself want anything just for you. With him, I can see you letting yourself believe in happiness." Before Diana could respond, Alice's voice called out from the living room, "Mama Dee, will you read to me?" Diana's heart swelled at the easy way Alice used the name, as if it had always belonged to her. "Of course, baby girl," as Diana settled on the couch with Alice curled against her side, Max and Xavier continued their conversation in the kitchen. She could hear the low murmur of their voices, occasionally catching words like medical school and family, and she realized they were bonding over their shared desire to protect and provide for the people they loved. "Mama Dee." Alice's voice was sleepy as Diana read from her favorite book. "Yes, sweetheart. When you and Daddy get married, will Xavier be my uncle?" Diana's heart melted a little more. "Would you like him to be?" "Yes. I always wanted a big family. Now I'm getting a mama and an uncle all at once. What about your daddy's family? Don't you have aunts and uncles?" Alice's expression grew complicated. "Daddy doesn't talk to his family much. They didn't like Mommy Sarah, and they think I'm difficult." Diana's protective instincts flared. "You are not difficult, Alice Sterling. You are perfect exactly as you are." "That's what Daddy says." "And now that's what you say too." Alice snuggled closer. "I like having people who think I'm perfect. You'll always have that with us," Diana promised. "Always." Later, after Xavier had gone home with promises to visit again soon, and Alice had fallen asleep during the drive back to the penthouse, Max carried his daughter upstairs while Diana followed, marveling at how natural this felt. "She's getting attached to you," Max said softly as they tucked Alice into her bed. "To the idea of you as her mother." "Is that a problem?" Max turned to face her in the hallway outside Alice's room, his expression serious. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." But Diana, if you ever change your mind about us, it will destroy her. Diana reached up to cup Max's face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. I'm not changing my mind. What we have, what we're building, it's real, Max. It's forever. Max leaned down to kiss her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Forever, he agreed against her lips. As they walked to Max's bedroom hand in hand, Diana realized that somewhere between arroz con pollo and bedtime stories, they had become a family. Not because of contracts or ceremonies, but because of choice. They had chosen each other, chosen this life, chosen love. And for the first time in her adult life, Diana was exactly where she belonged. Chapter 7. The Test. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, shrieking through the silence of Max's bedroom like a harbinger of doom. Diana jerked awake first, her body still attuned to years of emergency shifts and crisis calls. But Max was already reaching for the phone with the resigned efficiency of a man who knew that calls at this hour only brought bad news. "Sterling," he answered, his voice instantly alert, despite having been in deep sleep moments before. Diana watched his face change as he listened, watched the color drain from his features and his jaw tighten with barely controlled rage. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. "How long do we have?" More silence. Diana sat up, pulling the sheet around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of Max's bedroom. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, Max said finally, ending the call with sharp precision. "What's wrong?" Diana asked, though she already knew from his expression that whatever it was catastrophic. Max sat on the edge of the bed, running. His hands through his hair, in a gesture she'd learned, meant he was trying to process information too overwhelming to accept easily. "Corporate raiders," he said finally. "A group of investors led by Richard Blackstone. They've been quietly buying up Sterling Technologies stock for months. As of market close yesterday, they own 47% of my company." Diana's stomach dropped. She didn't know much about corporate finance, but she understood enough to know that this was devastating. "Can they do that? Just take your company?" "If they reach 51%, they can call for a vote to remove me as CEO. Blackstone's been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment to strike." Max's laugh was bitter. "Apparently, my engagement to a waitress gave him the opening he needed. He's convinced the board that I'm making personal decisions that compromise the company's image." The words hit Diana like a physical blow. "This is because of me." "No." Max turned to face her, his eyes fierce. "This is because Blackstone's a predator who's been looking for any excuse to steal what I've built. If it wasn't our relationship, he would have found something else." But Diana could see the truth beneath Max's protective anger. She'd heard the whispers at the few business events she'd attended with him, seen the looks from his associates who clearly thought she was an opportunistic outsider. Now those whispers had become weapons. "What can we do?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would break her heart. Max was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city lights below. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "Blackstone's planning to make his move public at the board meeting Friday. He'll present a motion of no confidence, citing my increasingly erratic personal choices as evidence that I'm unfit to lead the company. And if he succeeds, I lose everything. The company, the employees I'm responsible for, Alice's future financial security." Max's hands clenched into fists. "Everything I've built for the past 15 years. Diana's mind raced, trying to find a solution, a way to fight back that didn't require the ultimate sacrifice she could feel hovering between them. "What about other investors? People who support you?" "They exist, but they're scattered. And Blackstone's offering them a premium for their shares. Money talks louder than loyalty in this business." Diana got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the city where she'd spent her entire life. Somewhere down there was her apartment, the diner that now belonged to her, the life she'd built through sheer determination and sacrifice. It seemed so small compared to the empire Max stood to lose. "There's another option," Max said quietly, and Diana's blood turned to ice. She turned to face him, knowing what he was about to say, and desperately wishing she was wrong. "If I end our engagement publicly, if I make it clear that my relationship with you was a temporary lapse in judgment, Blackstone loses his ammunition. The board would see it as proof that I'm prioritizing the company over personal indulgences." The words hung in the air between them like a death sentence. Diana felt her heart crack, not because Max was suggesting it, but because she could see in his eyes that he was considering it. "That's what you want to do?" she asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "It's what would save the company." "That's not what I asked." Max stood and moved toward her, but Diana stepped back, needing distance to think clearly. "Diana, I have 12,000 employees counting on me, pension funds, families who depend on sterling technologies for their livelihoods. If I'm selfish, if I choose love over responsibility, I destroy all of that. And if you choose responsibility over love, you destroy us." Max's face crumpled with genuine anguish. "I know. God, Diana, I know. But how can I let thousands of people suffer because I fell in love?" Diana studied his face, seeing the man she'd fallen for warring with the CEO he'd trained himself to be. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to walk away, to make the noble sacrifice and set him free to save his empire. It would be clean, dramatic, the kind of ending that would let them both pretend they were heroes instead of victims. But then she thought about Alice, about the little girl who'd started calling her Mama D, who'd drawn pictures of their family and talked about swimming lessons and wedding dresses. She thought about the promise she'd made to love and protect this man and his daughter, about the life they'd started building together. "No," she said simply. Max blinked, clearly surprised. "No, no. I won't let you sacrifice our family to save a company, and I won't let some corporate shark intimidate us into giving up on love. Diana, you don't understand the stakes." "I understand that you're scared," Diana interrupted, moving closer to him. "I understand that you've spent 15 years building something amazing and the thought of losing it terrifies you. But Max, what good is an empire if you have to give up your soul to keep it?" Max stared at her, and Diana could see him struggling between the practical and the emotional, between the CEO who calculated risks and the man who loved her. "Blackstone's not just taking your company," Diana continued. "He's betting that your love for me isn't strong enough to fight for. He's counting on you to choose money over family, because that's what he would do. It's not about choosing money, isn't it? You're willing to throw away everything we've built together to protect your financial interests. How is that different from what he's doing?" Max was quiet for a long moment, and Diana held her breath, knowing that everything hung on his next words. "What are you suggesting?" he asked finally. "Fight back. Fight for the company. Fight for us. Fight for Alice's right to have the family she deserves." Diana took his hands in hers, feeling them tremble slightly. "You're Maximilian Sterling. You built an empire from nothing once. You can do it again if you have to, but you can't rebuild what we have if you destroy it now. And if I lose everything, if fighting costs me the company anyway?" Diana smiled, thinking of all the nights she'd worked multiple jobs, all the times she'd chosen love and loyalty over financial security. "Then we'll figure it out together. Alice will still have 2 parents who love her. You'll still have your brilliant mind and your incredible work ethic. And I'll still be here, whether you're a billionaire or we're sharing a 1-bedroom apartment above the diner." Max's eyes filled with tears as he pulled her into his arms, holding her with desperate intensity. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too." which is why I'm not going anywhere, no matter what Richard Blackstone or anyone else thinks about it." They stood together in the pre-dawn darkness, holding each other while the weight of the coming battle settled around them. Diana knew that the next few days would test everything they'd built together, that there would be moments when the pressure might break them. But she also knew that some things were worth fighting for, and love, real, lasting, transform-your-life love, was at the top of that list. "So what's our first move?" she asked, pulling back to look into his eyes. Max's smile was fierce and determined, the expression of a man who'd remembered who he was beneath the fear. "We show Blackstone what happens when someone threatens our family." As the sun began to rise over Seattle, Diana felt a surge of confidence she hadn't expected. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and together they were unstoppable. Chapter 8. Rising Together. Diana had never set foot in a corporate boardroom before, but as she walked into Sterling Technologies' executive conference room beside Max 3 days later, she felt like a warrior entering battle. The room was all polished wood and floor-to-ceiling windows, designed to intimidate, but Diana had faced down drunk customers, bill collectors and bureaucrats who wanted to separate her from Xavier. Rich men in expensive suits didn't scare her. Richard Blackstone, however, was genuinely unsettling. Tall and silver-haired with cold blue eyes, he radiated the kind of predatory confidence that came from decades of destroying other people's dreams for profit. When he saw Diana enter with Max, his smile was sharper than broken glass. "Sterling," Blackstone said, not bothering to stand. "I wasn't expecting you to bring guests to our board meeting." "Diana is my fiancée," Max replied evenly, helping her into the chair beside his at the head of the massive conference table. "She has every right to be here for discussions about our company's future. Your company's future is exactly what we're here to discuss." Blackstone's gaze raked over Diana with obvious disdain. "Along with the questionable judgment that's led us to this point." Diana felt the eyes of every board member in the room assessing her, weighing her worth, finding her lacking. But instead of shrinking under their scrutiny, she sat straighter, remembering every lesson her grandmother had taught her about dignity in the face of disrespect. "Gentlemen," Max began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd built everything around them from nothing. "Before we begin, I want to address the elephant in the room. Mr. Blackstone has suggested that my personal relationships compromise my ability to lead this company. I disagree. The numbers disagree with you," board member Harrison Caldwell interjected, sliding a folder across the table. "Stock prices have dropped 12% since news of your unusual engagement became public." Diana glanced at the financial reports, seeing red numbers that represented millions of dollars in lost value. For a moment, the magnitude of what their love was costing hit her like a physical blow, but then Max's hand found hers under the table, warm and steady, and she remembered what they were really fighting for. "Stock prices fluctuate," Max said calmly. "Market confidence can be rebuilt, but the innovations that have made Sterling Technologies the leader in our field, those come from people, not perception." "Pretty words," Blackstone sneered, "but investors care about results, not romance novels. Your little waitress may have charmed you, Sterling, but she's a liability to this company." The words hit their mark, and Diana felt heat flood her cheeks. But before she could respond, Alice's voice echoed in her memory. "You care about people's hearts." Diana stood, and the room fell silent. "Mr. Blackstone," she said, her voice carrying the quiet strength that had gotten her through every crisis in her life. "You're absolutely right. I am a waitress. I've also been a hotel housekeeper, a catering server, and a line cook. I've worked 3 jobs to put my brother through pre-med, slept 4 hours a night for years, and never missed a shift, even when I was sick." She walked around the table, feeling the power in moving while everyone else remained seated. What you see as a liability, I see as an education in the real world that most people in this room have never experienced. While you've been playing games with stock prices and market perception, I've been learning how to make impossible things work through sheer determination. And what exactly does that have to do with running a tech company? Caldwell asked condescendingly. Diana smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Everything, because while you've been plotting to steal Max's company, I've been working with our legal team to find a solution that actually serves the shareholders' interests. The room erupted in confused murmurs, and Diana saw uncertainty flicker across Blackstone's face for the first time. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. Max stood beside Diana, his expression proud and fierce. "Tell them, sweetheart." Diana had spent the last 3 days in intensive sessions with Max's lawyers and business advisors, her quick mind absorbing concepts that had once seemed impossibly complex. Her years of managing tight budgets, negotiating with suppliers for the diner, and finding creative solutions to impossible problems had given her a foundation that translated surprisingly well to corporate strategy. Sterling Technologies has been developing proprietary AI technology for the past 18 months, Diana said, her voice growing stronger with each word. Technology that's significantly undervalued in your current hostile takeover assessment. That's still experimental, board member Patricia Wells protested. It was experimental, Diana corrected. As of yesterday, we have preliminary agreements from 3 Fortune 500 companies expressing serious interest in licensing deals. While the contracts aren't finalized, the projected value would be substantial. The room fell dead silent. Diana could practically hear the mental calculators working as board members realized what those numbers meant. "Impossible," Blackstone said flatly. "Those deals have been in negotiation for months, with no progress." Diana's smile turned predatory. "That's because you've all been thinking like businessmen instead of people. I spent 2 days visiting the decision-makers at those companies, not in boardrooms, but in their actual work environments. I talked to the engineers and programmers who would be using our technology, the project managers who've been frustrated by current solutions, the CTOs who've been looking for exactly what we've developed." She moved back to her chair, feeling the momentum shifting in the room. While Mr. Blackstone was manipulating stock prices and playing boardroom politics, I was building relationships with the people who actually matter, the ones who'll determine whether our technology succeeds or fails. Max picked up the narrative seamlessly. Those 3 licensing deals, plus the pending patent applications Diana helped expedite, increased Sterling Technologies' actual value by approximately 40% overnight. Which means, Diana continued, that Mr. Blackstone's hostile takeover bid is now significantly undervaluing the company he's trying to steal. Any board that accepted his offer would be committing financial malpractice. The silence that followed was profound. Diana could see Blackstone's carefully laid plans crumbling as the board members exchanged glances that spoke of shifting allegiances. "Furthermore," Max said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of complete confidence, "I'm prepared to offer existing shareholders a special dividend from the licensing revenues, contingent on rejecting any outside takeover attempts for the next 5 years." "You can't do that," Blackstone sputtered, his composure finally cracking. "This is outrageous manipulation." "This is business," Diana interrupted coolly. "Something you might understand if you spent less time scheming and more time actually creating value." Board member after board member began asking questions about the licensing deals, the technology applications, the long-term revenue projections. Diana answered them with the confidence of someone who'd done her homework, while Max provided the technical details that proved their partnership was more than romantic. It was revolutionary. 2 hours later, Blackstone's motion of no confidence failed by a vote of 8-2. with his own supporters abandoning him once they understood the financial implications of Diana's work. As the board members filed out, several of them stopped to shake Diana's hand and welcome her to the Sterling Technologies family. Patricia Wells, who'd been among the most skeptical, actually smiled. "That was impressive, Ms. Sosa. I hope you'll consider joining our strategic planning committee." When the room finally emptied, except for Max, Diana, and a deflated-looking Blackstone, the defeated raider gathered his papers with shaking hands. "This isn't over," he said, his voice lacking its earlier conviction. "Yes, it is," Max replied simply. "And, Richard, the next time you try to destroy someone's life, make sure you understand what you're up against." Blackstone left without another word, and Diana finally allowed herself to collapse into her chair, the adrenaline that had carried her through the meeting finally fading. "Holy shit," she breathed, then immediately covered her mouth. "Sorry, I probably shouldn't swear in the boardroom." Max's laugh was pure joy as he pulled her into his arms. "Diana Sosa, you are absolutely magnificent. Do you realize what you just did? Saved your company? You didn't just save it, you transformed it. Those licensing deals will make Sterling Technologies one of the most valuable firms in the industry." Diana melted into his embrace, finally allowing herself to believe that they'd won. "We did it together." "No," Max said, pulling back to look into her eyes. "You did this. Your instincts, your ability to connect with people, your refusal to give. But that's what saved us." "I told you I wasn't going anywhere," Diana said softly. "I meant it." Max kissed her then, right there in the boardroom where powerful men had tried to tear them apart, and Diana knew that they'd proven something important. Love wasn't a weakness that could be exploited. It was a strength that could overcome any obstacle. When they broke apart, Max rested his forehead against hers, ready to go home and tell Alice that Mama D just became the most badass businesswoman in Seattle. Diana's laugh was pure happiness. "Let's go home." As they walked out of Sterling Technologies together, hand in hand, Diana realized that they weren't the same people who'd fallen in love in a diner during a thunderstorm. They'd been tested by forces that could have destroyed them, and they'd emerged stronger, more united, absolutely unbreakable. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners in every sense of the word, and that was worth more than all the money in the world. Chapter 9. Victory and Purpose. 6 months after the boardroom battle that nearly destroyed them, Diana stood in the middle of what had once been an abandoned warehouse in South Seattle, watching contractors put the finishing touches on her dream-made manifest. The Alice Sterling Community Center was everything she'd imagined and more. Bright, welcoming spaces designed specifically for children with special needs, a commercial kitchen where she could teach cooking classes, therapy rooms equipped with the latest technology, and a childcare facility that would allow parents to work without worrying about their children's care. "Mama D, look," Alice called from across the main activity room, where she was testing out the new wheelchair-accessible art stations. "I can reach everything perfectly." Diana's heart swelled with pride as she watched Alice navigate the space with confidence. The little girl had been intimately involved in the design process, her insights proving invaluable in creating an environment that was truly inclusive rather than just accessible. "It's perfect, baby girl," Diana called back, then turned to Max, who was standing beside her with an expression of wonder on his face. "What do you think?" "I think," Max said softly, "that you've created something miraculous here." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of construction, planning, fundraising, and unexpected media attention. After Diana's role in the boardroom became public knowledge, she'd been approached for interview requests, speaking opportunities, and business propositions. Several publications had featured their story, focusing on Diana's transition from waitress to community advocate. But Diana had used the attention strategically, leveraging her newfound platform to raise awareness and funding for the community center. The licensing deals she'd negotiated had made Max's company even more profitable than projected, and he'd insisted on making the center's funding their first major philanthropic initiative. "Diana?" Xavier's voice carried across the space as he entered with Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatric specialist they'd recruited to run the center's medical programs. "The NBC News crew is here for the interview." Diana took a deep breath, still not entirely comfortable with the media attention that had become part of her life. The story of the waitress who'd saved a billion-dollar company had captured the public imagination, but Diana tried to stay focused on what really mattered, the families they were helping. "Ready?" Max asked, squeezing her hand. "As I'll ever." The interview went well, Diana thought, as she and Max answered questions about the center's mission, their relationship, and the challenges of building something meaningful in the public eye. The reporter, Sandra Martinez, had done her homework and asked thoughtful questions about sustainability, accessibility, and their long-term vision. "Ms. Sosa," Sandra said as they wrapped up, "your story has inspired a lot of people. What would you say to other women who feel like they're stuck in circumstances beyond their control?" Diana considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, she would never have imagined sitting in a community center that bore Alice's name, engaged to a man who'd shown her that love could overcome any obstacle, with her brother finishing his final year of medical school debt-free, thanks to a scholarship fund Max had quietly established. "I'd say that circumstances don't define you. Your response to them does," Diana said finally. "I was a waitress working 3 jobs, and I'm still proud of that. Those jobs taught me everything I needed to know about resilience, about treating people with dignity, about finding solutions when there don't seem to be any. Don't let anyone tell you that where you come from determines where you can go." After the news crew left, Diana found herself alone with Max and Alice in the center's main kitchen, the 3 of them sharing pizza, while Alice regaled them with her plans for the cooking classes she wanted to help teach. "Mrs. Patterson at school says I'm too young to be a teacher," Alice said through a mouthful of cheese. "But I told her that age is just a number when you have important things to share." "That's very wise," Diana laughed. "And technically you're not too young to be a teaching assistant." "Really? I could be your official assistant. If your father agrees, I think that's a wonderful idea." Max smiled, watching his daughter's excitement with the same expression of amazement he'd worn when Diana first walked into their lives. "I think Mama D could use all the help she can get." The casual use of Diana's new title still sent warmth through her chest. Over the past months, Alice had transitioned completely to calling her Mama D, and Diana had legally begun the process of adopting her after their wedding. The little girl would keep her sterling name, but she would officially be Diana's daughter, in every way that mattered. "Speaking of which," Max said, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket, "this came today." Diana recognized the return address immediately, the Seattle Community Foundation, where they'd applied for additional funding to expand their programs. She opened it with hands that only trembled slightly. "We got it," she whispered, reading the award letter twice to make sure she wasn't imagining things. "Max, we got the full amount." "How much?" Alice asked, bouncing in her seat. "Enough to build the second building," Diana said, tears of joy streaming down her face. "The one with the swimming therapy pool and the sensory garden." Max pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while Alice cheered. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You know what this means?" he asked. "That we're going to help even more families?" "That too. But it also means that what we've built here is sustainable, self-sufficient. The Alice Sterling Community Center is going to outlive all of us." The magnitude of that hit Diana like a wave. They weren't just creating a program, they were establishing a legacy, something that would continue helping children and families long after they were gone. "I never imagined," Diana said softly, When I was working at the diner, that I could be part of something this big. You were always part of something this big, Max said, cupping her face in his hands. You just needed the right opportunity to show the world what you were capable of. Alice tugged on Diana's hand, drawing her attention back down. Mama D, are you crying because you're happy or sad? Happy, baby girl. So incredibly happy that we're going to help even more families? That too, but it also means that what we've built here is sustainable, self-sufficient. The Alice Sterling Community Center is going to outlive all of us. The magnitude of that hit Diana like a wave. They weren't just creating a program, they were establishing a legacy, something that would continue helping children and families long after they were gone. I never imagined, Diana said softly, when I was working at the diner, that I could be part of something this big. You were always part of something this big, Max said, cupping her face in his hands. You just needed the right opportunity to show the world what you were capable of. Alice tugged on Diana's hand, drawing her attention back down. Mama D, are you crying because you're happy or sad? Happy, baby girl. So incredibly happy. Good, because I have something to show you. Alice led them to the center's main bulletin, a board where she'd posted a new drawing alongside the dozens of others, created by the children who'd been attending their pre-opening programs. This one showed the three of them standing in front of a building labeled Alice's Place, but instead of stick figures, Alice had drawn them with careful detail. Diana in a chef's apron, Max in a business suit, and herself in a t-shirt that read, Teaching Assistant. Below the drawing, in Alice's careful 9-year-old handwriting, she'd written, My family helps other families. That's what love does. Diana knelt down to Alice's level, pulling the little girl into a fierce hug. That's exactly what love does, sweetheart. As they stood together in the kitchen of the community center they'd built from nothing but dreams and determination, Diana realized that this was what happily ever after actually looked like. Not a perfect ending where all problems disappeared, but a beautiful beginning where love created purpose, where individual strengths combined to build something greater than the sum of its parts. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more families to serve, more programs to develop, the wedding they were planning for next month. But tonight, surrounded by evidence of what they'd accomplished together, Diana felt nothing but gratitude for the storm that had blown Max and Alice into her life. Come on, Max said, switching off the kitchen lights. Let's go home. Home, Diana. Loved the sound of that word, loved the way it encompassed not just a place, but a feeling, a sense of belonging that she'd spent most of her life searching for. As they walked to the car together, Alice between them chattering about tomorrow's plans, Diana caught Max watching her with that expression of wonder he still got sometimes, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. What? She asked, bumping his shoulder with hers. Just thinking about how different our lives would be if you hadn't been working that night, if we'd gone to a different diner, or if the storm had hit at a different time. Diana considered that, remembering the woman she'd been before Max and Alice transformed her world. I don't think the timing mattered, she said finally. I think we were always meant to find each other. Maybe not that exact night, maybe not in that exact way, but somehow, somewhere, we would have found our way to each other. You really believe that? Diana looked at Alice, skipping ahead to the car despite her leg braces, already making plans for tomorrow's adventures. She thought about Xavier, thriving in medical school and genuinely excited about his future role as Uncle Z. She thought about the community center that would soon be filled with children and families finding hope and support. I believe in us, she said simply, and that's enough. Max stopped walking and turned to face her fully, his hands framing her face in the gesture that had become their signature of intimacy. Diana Sosa, he said softly, you saved my life. No, Diana replied, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. "You saved mine. We saved each other." As they drove home through the Seattle streets where Diana had spent her entire life, she realized that salvation didn't always look like rescue. Sometimes it looked like partnership, like choosing to build something beautiful together, despite all the forces trying to tear you apart. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it looked like love. Chapter 10. Forever. Promise. Diana stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite at the Alice Sterling Community Center, hardly recognizing the woman staring back at her. The wedding dress was perfect, not the elaborate princess gown that society magazines might have expected, but an elegant silk sheath that moved like water and made her feel like herself, only more beautiful than she'd ever imagined possible. "You look like a queen," Xavier said from behind her, his voice thick with emotion. At 25, her baby brother had grown into a handsome, confident man, but Diana could still see the 14-year-old boy who'd cried in her arms the night their parents died. "I feel like I'm dreaming," Diana admitted, smoothing the simple veil that had belonged to Max's grandmother, the one family heirloom he'd insisted on sharing with her, despite his strained relationship with his parents. "If you are, don't wake up," Alice said, appearing in the doorway in her flower girl dress. The lavender silk perfectly complemented her dark hair, which Diana had braided with tiny white flowers. "You and Daddy are supposed to live happily ever after." Diana's heart clenched with love as she knelt down to Alice's level, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "What if I told you that happily ever after isn't the ending of the story? What if it's really the beginning?" Alice considered this, with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. "You mean we get to have adventures and solve problems and help people, but we get to do it together forever?" "Exactly. Then that's even better than a fairy tale ending." A soft knock on the door interrupted them, and Diana's heart skipped as Max's voice carried through the wood. "I know I'm not supposed to see you, but Alice forgot her flower basket and I wanted to—" He paused, and Diana could picture him running his hands through his hair, the way he did when he was nervous. "I just wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" Diana called back, fighting the urge to open the door and see his face. "I love you, not just for today, not just for the wedding, but for every day we've had and every day we're going to have. You've made me believe in forever, Diana Sosa." Tears threatened to ruin her carefully applied makeup, but Diana didn't care. "I love you too, Maximilian Sterling, more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "Okay," Alice said practically, "but if you two keep talking through the door, we're going to be late for your own wedding." Diana laughed, wiping her eyes carefully. "She's right. Go get ready to marry me, Mr. Sterling." "Already am, future Mrs. Sterling." 20 minutes later, Diana stood at the back of the community center's main hall, her arm linked through Xavier's as they prepared to walk down the aisle. The space had been transformed with thousands of white flowers and soft lighting, but what took her breath away wasn't the decor, it was the people. Every seat was filled with faces that mattered. The families they'd helped through the community center, Max's employees who'd become genuine friends, Diana's co-workers from the diner days, and even some of the customers who'd become part of her extended family over the years. This wasn't the society wedding that Max's wealth could have bought. It was a celebration of love, surrounded by a community they'd built together. "Ready?" Xavier asked softly. Diana looked down the aisle to where Max stood waiting for her, and her breath caught in her throat. He was devastating in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that made her knees weak. Pure love, absolute certainty, and something that looked like reverence as he watched her approach. Alice had started down the aisle before them, scattering rose petals with scientific precision while beaming at the assembled guests. Every few steps, she would pause to wave at someone she recognized, treating the formal processional like the joyful celebration it was meant to be. The music shifted to the wedding march, and Diana began her walk toward the man who had changed everything about her life. With each step, she felt the weight of the past lifting away, the years of struggle, the loneliness, the doubt that she deserved something this beautiful. Halfway down the aisle, she caught Max's eye, and he smiled, with such pure happiness that she felt her own face light up in response. This was right, this was meant to be. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. When Xavier placed her hand in Max's at the altar, Diana felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. They'd been through the fire together and emerged stronger. They'd proven that love could overcome any obstacle, that partnership could accomplish the impossible. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Diana barely heard the words. She was lost in Max's eyes, in the promise she saw there, in the absolute certainty that this moment was the beginning of their greatest adventure. When it came time for vows, Max went first, his voice strong and clear, despite the emotion. Diana could see him fighting to control. "Diana, 8 months ago, you were a stranger who showed kindness to my daughter during a storm. Today, you're the woman who taught me what it means to have a partner, what it means to build something meaningful, what it means to love without reservation." He paused, swallowing hard. "You saved my company, but more importantly, you saved my heart. You showed me that strength isn't about protecting yourself from love, it's about being brave enough to fight for it." Diana's vows came from a place so deep in her heart that she hadn't known it existed. "Max, you've given me a family, a purpose, and a love I never dared to dream was possible. But more than that, you've shown me who I can be when someone believes in me completely. You've never asked me to be anyone other than exactly who I am, and you've loved me not despite my background, but because of the strength it gave me." She looked at Alice, who was watching with rapt attention. "You've both taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, about commitment, about showing up for each other no matter what." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Max's kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as the crowd erupted in cheers around them. Diana lost herself in the moment, in the taste of him, in the promise of all the tomorrows they would share. "I present to you," the minister announced with a broad smile, "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling and their daughter Alice." The reception was everything Diana had wanted: intimate, joyful, filled with laughter and dancing and the kind of celebration that made everyone feel welcome. Alice held court at her own special table, telling anyone who would listen about how she'd known from the very beginning that Diana and her daddy were meant to be together. During their first dance, Max pulled Diana close and whispered in her ear, "Any regrets, Mrs. Sterling?" Diana looked around at their guests: Xavier dancing with one of the community center's board members, Alice teaching some of her new school friends how to do the electric slide, Max's employees mingling seamlessly with her old diner family. "Just one," she said, and felt Max tense slightly. "What's that?" "I regret that it took a thunderstorm to bring us together. I wish I'd found you sooner." Max's smile was radiant as he spun her around the dance floor. "Perfect timing, remember? We found each other exactly when we were ready to appreciate what we had." As the evening wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Diana found herself standing with Max and Alice on the community center's front steps, still in their wedding clothes, watching their friends and family head home. "So what happens now?" Alice asked, taking both their hands. "Are we going to live happily ever after?" Diana exchanged a look with Max, thinking about all the plans they'd made, all the dreams they still wanted to pursue. The community center was thriving. Max's company was stronger than ever, and they were talking about expanding their programs to other cities. There would be challenges, obstacles, moments when they'd have to fight for what they'd built. But there, would also be quiet Sunday mornings and family dinners and bedtime stories. There would be watching Alice grow up and helping her navigate her own dreams. There would be growing old together and building a legacy that went far beyond money or success. "Alice," Diana said, squeezing the little girl's hand, "I think we're going to live something even better than happily ever after." "What's better than happily ever after?" Max answered for both of them, his voice warm with certainty. "Happily ever together." As they walked back into the community center together, husband, wife, and daughter, Diana realized that this was what true wealth looked like. Not numbers in bank accounts or property portfolios, but love that multiplied when shared, purpose that gave meaning to every day, and family that chose each other over and over again. The storm that had brought them together had passed, but the love they'd built in its wake would weather any tempest. They were home, they were together, and they were exactly where they belonged. Forever was just beginning.